to you going.
Wow, no, thank you very much. That was very kind. I feel very important now. So just as a matter of fact for today, I mean, this is the first time I've given kind of a talk like this to this kind of specific audience. So some of the stuff I'm still working out, and also it's hard to gauge kind of where people are at with their knowledge. I'm very happy for people to raise questions throughout, and we can get into the weeds a bit about things, and make sure that I'd really like to make sure that everybody's no one's left behind, and no one's kind of not understanding what we're talking about. As Noel said, we're going to kind of get into some specific methods and things, and talk about how those are used within projects. So if you're not familiar with those, please raise a hand and we can go into kind of more detail about those things. So I think just a really brief disclaimer. As Noel said, I've worked in kind of a number of sectors, and only kind of for the last kind of 4 or 5 years have I worked more in the public sector. And I just want to say kind of we're going to be talking about kind of GDS practices and how government projects are set up and how policy works. And in no way do I think that, I don't want that to come off as criticism in any kind of way. I think that I've been always amazed at how incredibly diligent and passionate civil servants are. Obviously, not being a civil servant myself, it's really nice to see. I think also I'm not here to criticize kind of how GDS is set up either. Actually, I really love it. I love it as a kind of sandbox. I think it's important to be playful, and I think of GDS is the structure of the service manual and things like that are kind of a great playground to play within. So I'm not trying to change the structures of anything that go on within the government. I'm just looking at how we can kind of maybe shift our thinking about how we look at those things and maybe get more out of them. So just take anything I say with a grain of salt, but I don't want it to come off as criticizing. It's to be positive. So. And actually, as Noel said, just briefly, the couple of things that make it easy for me to talk about this. So the collaboration lab that I ran for many years was actually so basically it was taking methods of innovation, of business tools, things like that, and playing with those things. So we would, take different forms of divergence. So you would kind of make, brainstorming techniques, and we would pit them against each other. Or we would take canvases, like the business model canvas, or different kinds of ways to collaborate with people, and we would test those things out. So what we would do is we would say, okay, well, what does this thing do? How do we use it? How do we use it with other things? How do those things connect? What's the function of this? Maybe what was the intended function of this, and then maybe how might I change that function as well? So it was a real way to kind of do that. And I did it for a number of years in the UK and in Zurich as well when I lived there. And so it gave me a really unique perspective on how I think about tools, and a real confidence to manipulate those things or change them to fit kind of how I want them to be. And so we're going to kind of talk about some of those things. One of the things that came out of that was I also created kind of a taxonomy of those tools, so I can see different ways in which those tools kind of relate to each other or can be planned together and used. I've run a startup, and most of the projects I've worked throughout the years have been kind of in innovation, oftentimes very painfully so. Big organizations, many organizations are trying to innovate with a lot of people who actually don't know that much about innovation, and it's really depressing sometimes to see how hard people are working, but can still easily fail. And obviously, having worked kind of full product stack, kind of from research to product management, gives me kind of an overview of the whole thing. So there's just kind of two parts to this talk, and I've only got kind of 28 slides or so, and so I'm happy for us to kind of expand and talk about some of these things. But first, I'm just going to take you through a little journey about my own journey the last couple of years and where I've gotten to, because I shifted into the public sector, and just immediately kind of was very frustrated when I was in kind of discovery and alpha projects, it was really challenging for me, kind of knowing what I knew from kind of the startup world and from other projects, to try to kind of get those things in there. So I want to talk about how I came and approached that, and then we're going to look at just a few of the lessons that I've learned from that, and maybe why some of that works, why some of it may not, and maybe what we can do going forward to make improvements to create a better ground bed for innovation within the government. So a couple of years ago, when I shifted in and started doing this kind of work, one of the things that really frustrated me was that I think behavioral design is kind of one of the key, is the most powerful things we have as designers. It's obviously kind of a new field, and it's a new part of the kind of design toolkit, but it also equally is incredibly powerful. And I wanted to be able to use that within kind of quick government projects. And I know that there's like the behavioral unit and things like that, but the reality was it was very difficult to get to that stage, because you have to kind of get everybody to understand it. Not everybody understands behavioral design. The research that you need to kind of get that stuff working, connected up to the problems, it can be very challenging. The other thing I wanted to focus on was to be outcome based. So instead of getting brought in and saying, hey, just deliver this service or just design this service for us, it's like, well, what is the outcome that we're trying to get to? I don't the service is an output, that's great, but what is it that you're trying to achieve? And I think I've seen a variable degree within different departments. Some people are very good at kind of setting up projects and saying, okay, well, this is the outcome we're trying to achieve, and we're already measuring these things. Sometimes it's not. So there's a high variability from kind of a contractor point of view to get to that kind of outcome focus. But it's very challenging, because obviously people have pressure to deliver something, right? You're paying a lot of money, you want to deliver something, and getting the team to get to that outcome quite quickly is quite challenging. So I kind of wanted to shift from the left side here to the right side, and that shift was what I was finding is when I would jump into these projects very quickly, we were trying to kind of get cohesive really quick, and then understand what we were going to test out. Oftentimes, depending on the level of the ability with the people, we would often test things that didn't matter. Oh, we're worried that we can't deliver this kind of service. Well, that's what we're here to do. That's fine. It was prioritizing the things to test were often very challenging, and we would end up kind of like testing out things that I think on the larger scale of the problem weren't going to be as impactful as they could be. There was just not enough time to experiment. I get into these projects, and then all of a sudden, by the time we had kind of come to some agreement on the direction that we were going to take, we had a couple of weeks to really experiment, and we had to kind of formulate some solution so that we could start to iterate and learn and do a user-centered design process, which is important, but it didn't leave a lot of time for really testing out different ideas. I think there's a lot of cargo cult experimentation. So what I mean by that is like a lot of people work using things like hypotheses, assumptions, user needs, but not all of those things are created equal. And oftentimes you see kind of hypotheses that are not very well formulated, or, or are really or not very consequential in the end as well. A lot of the teams as well, there's no set of agreed upon things to learn. So you're trying to learn lots of different things. And oftentimes you're just really overwhelmed with the amount of information that you're trying to understand, get to grips with, and you're trying to kind of find your feet to create something. And basically, there's not a lot of time to have those discussions to say, hey, is this important for us to learn, or is this important for us to learn? And being able to kind of, align a team in a certain way. And it often means that the team is kind of going at different speeds and different tracks until the end. So I think, from obviously the projects are set up. They're kind of there's a certain time to these projects, but it becomes very stressful, and I think needlessly so, because we don't really need to be stressing ourselves out so much to try to learn everything that we can about the work that we're doing. I think there's kind of more specific things that we can learn. And then just the chaotic nature of the work. So I don't know how many people here work on kind of mirror boards or Lucid or things like that. You're kind of just things are everywhere. The virtual walls these days. There's just so much information. You've got research over here. You've got prototypes over here. It's very difficult to kind of bring all that together and know what's happening. And oftentimes, I think the team actually can navigate that space quite well. But if you have a team that gets dissolved and then a new team comes, it's almost impossible to really kind of piece that picture together. You might try to, but there's no consistency there as people do things in different ways. So I really just wanted to shift to a place where I was really, that experimentation was easy, that we were creating really valid experiments, that the focus was on outcomes. That we could prototype more and more powerfully prototype. So I think there are ways to prototype which are not being accessed at the moment, and I think there's a lot of value there to be able to kind of prototype in interesting ways. And I wanted to be able to use behavioral design in all the projects that I was working on. So just to kind of quickly look at the context. So is there anyone here who doesn't know the kind of discovery and alpha and beta phases of the service manual? Just want to check. Anybody's not familiar with that? No, I rely on you to view the chat window so I can see. All good?
Looks like everyone has seen that process before. So hopefully,
okay. Just wanted to double check. I think if we look at like the discovery, alpha, and beta phases, I think nominally speaking, the way that the service manual is written and what the idea is that kind of, you spend discovery, that's really to define the problem. You spend alpha, which is kind of your chance to experiment and innovate. And then basically, then the beta is to do the delivery and obviously kind of the continuous discovery aspect. So, for me coming into this, it's like, oh yeah, I have this whole space to innovate, to experiment, to kind of test out different things. And the first time that I jumped into an alpha, basically there was no real decision on what we were actually trying to solve as a problem, even though it had kind of gone through discovery. That formulation didn't really connect to kind of prototyping specifically. It was kind of there wasn't a solution there. It was kind of, yeah, we think it's this thing, but there's so much stuff we don't know about that. And so I was kind of saying, okay, well, yeah, I'm ready to prototype. And it's like, but what's the problem we're trying to solve? And then by the time we could work that out as a team, we were really under the gun to get something out, right? And there's all that pressure. I think one of the things that's amazing is the amount of pressure that before there's a solution that's really resolved itself. There's a tension in the teams as well. So I think actually what happens is it looks more like this. You've got this kind of thin slice of innovation. You've got kind of like discovery. The thing is, we've defined the problem in a way, but oftentimes these problems are very big, or there's so many facets to them. And as you start to prototype and iterate on things, you learn more about the problem. There's often kind of like, depending on how well the problem formulation has actually occurred, the team might kind of agree. If you had the same team through discovery and alpha, everybody might kind of be agreed. But if you add any new people, now you've got to, try to kind of all understand the same thing. So I think what really ends up happening is within these, there's just this very, very thin slice of innovation. We can try out a couple of things very quickly. It's like one round of testing. We've got, A, B, and C here. what do our users think that which solution is good, and then we're going to go with that one. So, and that also, that basically decides that your most likely outcome for that is going to be a service or a product that has already been kind of thought about, right? So it's basically, oh yeah, we just going to do that thing because there's no time to really do anything else, and we're here to deliver, a service. And I think in no way do I want to, that's the way the system is set up. That makes sense. Contractors are there to deliver things, and as we should. But it just means that there's very, very little time for us to actually kind of consider innovation in a way, and experiment in a way that I think really uncovers better ways to solve problems and deeper understanding of our users. So. Let's see here. So basically, what I wanted to just briefly talk about is, I think one of the things when I say innovation, I think we often talk about, we have this mental model of innovation being like this massive monolithic thing. Oh yeah, we're going to go innovate. And I find that very difficult because there's so many different types of innovation, and it's not all the same thing. And I think when we talk about innovation, we need to be kind of very specific about what type of innovation that is. So I've kind of created this little kind of conceptual model of innovation. And let's see here, resolving. So basically, this isn't everything, but these are some of the different types of innovation that we have. So we often have incremental innovation, which is, the core kind of part of user-centered design. Oh, we found this problem that users are having, maybe with an existing service, and we're gonna improve that service. We're gonna make it just a bit better. We're gonna solve that problem for users, and we're gonna get to the next kind of level. And one day, we might get to the top of this hill, and that would be the best service that it could be. It'd be the best registration service, or the best, directory service, or whatever it is. And you're kind of using, you're researching the problem, you're pushing pushing it up the hill, and that's really good. And that's, if you're just basically kind of, trying to kind of create innovation within a specific context, it works, right? It's a really great way to improve products. There's also product or service or process innovation. So basically, we have this service. Maybe it's kind of fulfilling a need, but maybe we can make that service much, much better. So let's create a whole nother service or a set of services or a product to kind of change how that works. We also have value proposition innovation, which is basically connecting services, products, and I think in this case also policy to specific user needs. So and that doesn't just have to be a singular service, right? It could be a textured example of services. So it could be one or two services, a product, 3 different policies, or some new features and things like that. Because ideally, if we're going to try to solve a problem, just having one service is probably not going to solve that problem. And then there's other things like that probably aren't as relevant to government sometimes, although sometimes they might happen. But business model innovation. So basically, how do we finding better ways to deliver the our value proposition, or our service or process, and radical innovation as well, which is basically when we're creating a new technology, so and a new meaning. So basically, if we have like near field technology, right, and you use that for trash collection, that may completely change how you access that technology and how you use it, things like that. And it might mean something completely different for the user who's doing that. So a sense of ease, or the way that they think about it, or the way that it's delivered. So Michael, is there a question? Any questions so far, anyway?
Oh, there's a question in the chat, Ryan. So if you have any tips and advice on how to make the space for innovation with different timescales and expectations of political stakeholders, policymakers, but also academics and researchers, which I imagine will have their different timescales?
Actually, that's a great question, and I'm gonna talk about that at the very end. So I have something to speak directly to that. So I think that's when we talk about the problems that we're solving. Obviously, they're kind of there's policy. There's also the the best practice for those problems as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. So yeah, really good question.
One question I had, right? I thought it's really good how you've distinguished the different types of innovation, because some people, just use innovation and then it's like difficult to then kind of work out how then you develop it. I was just kind of wondering with how do policymakers or designers be able to, I guess, articulate or kind of simplify those types of innovation to people that maybe aren't used to those, kind of those particular methods or ways of working, so that other people involved in the process can also contribute to innovation, whether it's business model innovation or product innovation, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we kind of look back here, I mean, I think one of the things is if we look at the kind of the GDS model, most of the time, so sometimes you're going to be just doing kind of incremental innovation, and that's going to happen a lot. But I think one of the core things is that, if we are creating if you're trying to solve a problem, right, more than likely that's going to be value proposition innovation. And so I think it's less about kind of necessarily distinguishing about, and also about policy designers themselves familiarizing themselves and understanding value proposition design at a much deeper level. I know that there are other people who have kind of talked about that maybe in this space, but certainly understanding how value proposition design works. And we'll go into a little bit more detail about that. But I think that's really core to that, because whenever you're creating a new service, or you're changing a bunch of existing services, right, and you're trying to connect them up to user needs, that's going to be centered around value proposition innovation.
Great.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. No, great questions. So I think one of the issues, so given the fact that I actually like most of this is centered around value proposition design, one of the things is we also kind of come at it when you get teams together and there's basically so many tools people are trying to, and there's loads of ways to solve problems. There's loads of ways to do innovation. And, I think it's easy to recognize that, but at the end of the day, you're kind of getting a bunch of strangers together who have worked in very different ways. Some of them understand design, some of them understand, policy, some of them understand just business in general. And they don't all speak the same language. They don't all use the same tools. And I think one of the things is you get people who can kind of myself included, kind of start to take a team in a direction, and all of a sudden oh yeah, we're using this tool, it's great. Oh, now the whole thing has changed, and we're going to drop that tool and we're going to go do something else. So I have a feeling probably loads of you have experienced this, and also that kind of change as well. You're trying to document all this stuff. So you've got some Miro board just full of things, and then you're moving here and oh no, we learned this thing. Let's pull it apart. And so it's really, really difficult because there's just no anchoring, right? You just, for the first couple of projects I was doing, I just felt like I was kind of going back and forth, and I quite like the churn of learning new things and being able to, but even for me, I found it quite difficult. And so I think for me, the core question here is like, what are the key tools that we need to innovate? What are the things that we, I mean, there's obviously loads of different things that we can bring in, but what is just like kind of the set core things? And for me, if we're talking about kind of behavioral design and we're talking about impact, I think that these are the core things that I would kind of pick up. Not the only things, but the kind of some of the core tools. And so we'll go through just briefly each one of these. If there's any questions about kind of, if you're not familiar with any of these, then let me know and we can go into more detail. But impact mapping, which is from Goku. is basically a way to, I mean, if we talk about kind of inputs and outputs, this is some tools you can input something and you get something out of it. You know, in impact mapping, you're inputting an objective. So what is, you know, often key results, so something you want to quantitatively measure. You know, we want to increase sign up by 10%, or, you know, we want to, you know, could be reduce the feeling of anxiety while waiting for passport. You know, it could be anything that, I mean, you can measure that as well, basically. So whatever the objective is, you can start with that. And then you basically want to look at the different actors who are involved in that. So some are going to be your users that you're actually specifically catering to, and some may be other actors that you're not aware of when you start, and maybe kind of impacting the final solution. You can then basically look at impacts, as Goku calls them. So you know, what are the things that you want to change, and then basically you connect that to your solutions. So that's a way for you to kind of like say, okay, well, how do we get from solution and know that it's actually going to connect to the result that we want. The value proposition design is focused around jobs, gains, and pains, and then how you're solving those. So basically the round side is the user, and this is the product side. So how do we solve the user problem? And then also we have personas, which is a common tool, but it's a way to document, obviously, the specific user that we're looking at, and understand whether they're different from another user. This is the create action funnel. If I know that some people in the government use kind of COM-B. I think the create action funnel, which is by Stephen Wendell, I think is better in a sense because it's more diagnostic. It's easier to kind of go through and say, from a design perspective, we can see here that there's an issue. You know, is it at the evaluation stage? You know, is it in their ability to actually achieve this behavior? And basically, we can look at those specifics, so we can design at specific levels throughout the funnel, which makes it very powerful for us to be able to do that. And then obviously kind of getting to kind of an experiment backlog. What are the things that we want to test out in order to understand what impacts we're creating? So I'm just going to stop there for a second. I think it's if we need to have a conversation about kind of some of these tools. Are people familiar with these tools? Have they used them in previous projects or anything?
I've used value proposition and the funnel. I think personas I use quite regularly, and we do keep the backlog.
And that's really interesting that you've used value proposition. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? Because I think there are very few. I've seen very few people use it in government.
So we had technology on estate that we wanted to operationalize, but it wasn't so easy. So we've gone back to the drawing board, and I've led on this work, and basically I've just identified stakeholders who would gain value from the technology, and I've gone to those stakeholders, asked them, how would you use it? And I would write their journey, their expected journey, and the value that they would want to get out of it, and how that journey would get them to that value. So that technology identified three main groups of stakeholders. One is, like, for example, analytical community, compliance, data protection colleagues, and the third one is architectural community. So three propositions were developed. And then development of technology was then tailored to hit individual value. And then senior leadership can then make a decision on which value to prioritize, for example, to develop. So we know we've got several hundred analysts, so analytical value is really big, really significant. So we may want to prioritize that over anything else. So that's how we approach the value proposition one.
So it sounds to me a little bit like you're focused on the value delivery aspect. So were you were you looking at the jobs as well, or were you just looking at the things that were kind of how they valued the the product.
The job specifically, which members of staff would interact with this piece of technology, with this piece of kit, and how they would go about it, what they would want to do to be able to do. What are they doing at the moment? What can't they do at the moment and would be able to do if this was there? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I think one of the interesting things about that is so it sounds like you're familiar with jobs, which I think is really good. I think one of the things that we see though is that, you know, I guess in a like you're saying, okay, well, we had this issue with a specific kind of area, and then we decided that was the best tool, and then we went and used the tool to solve the problem, which I think is great. But I think what happens is, like, you know, you were able to kind of focus your research specifically on that tool. In this context, like, what happens is, you know, if you're trying to fill out all these tools, you know, the way that these things talk about them, or the language is completely different, right? You've got jobs and value proposition, you've got impacts and impact, you've got behavior here. So how do we research for all of those things and fill all those things out? It's a you know, Sisyphean task to be able to kind of get all that information together and then try to kind of, you know, be focused enough to actually get an experiment backlog together. So I think that's kind of the maybe a slight difference about how we're approaching this. And I think there's a couple of key things that we can do. So one is if we just focus on some, we change a couple of things. So one is on the value proposition, instead of talking about jobs, we talk about user needs, which I think there's a few different reasons why we can make that change. But I think one is it fits better with government. I think jobs and jobs to be done as a framework is brilliant. It's very hard in a government context because people just don't understand it. It's a whole thing that you have to kind of develop and everything, whereas user needs can be kind of taken a little bit more on their own. I think we can talk about value and pain points as well. And that connects up better with things like, you know, experience or journey maps, if you're mapping out those kinds of things. On the impact map, what we can do is we can change impacts to behaviors, and we can also add a column to create experiments. So we can actually connect up our behaviors and our experiments together within one single tool. And then basically we've got our behaviors connected to the design funnel as well. I think on the persona, I mean, obviously there's lots of different ways to view personas. If we're going to segment personas based on kind of behavioral research, then, you know, basically key to that is the behaviors, the user needs, and I would say is values as well is another thing. What users value what, and that may be brought into some parts of the value proposition. It may not be. So I think if we kind of limit the way that we kind of create a more functional view of persona, then it allows us to kind of be a bit faster with that as well.
Ryan, there's a few people in their chat who wanted to find out a bit more about the funnel and how that works, how you use that.
Yeah. So on the create action funnel, so there's a few different aspects. So basically, just bring this in so we can talk about it real quick. So the funnel is basically a kind of be able to see the loss as people kind of are trying to kind of achieve a behavior. So so this is the create action funnel, and basically, like, we've got kind of cue, reaction, evaluation, ability check, and time pressure. So it's a way for us to kind of diagnose. So say we have a behavior that's not the outcome that we wanted, right? And I think, you know, when we talk about kind of like behaviors, obviously, and all this stuff, user needs as well, we need to talk about scale and scope and where we're at with that. But let's use kind of like you know, something quite big like smoking as a kind of a way to look at this. So basically, say we want to stop people from smoking. Well, you know, if we look at that kind of that instance where their behavior is to kind of break down the smoking aspect. So they have a cue. So maybe they smoke when they drink. So obviously, if they drink, then basically they're going to kind of react to that, and part of their brain's going to say, okay, well, we want to be able to kind of to smoke now. So then they basically say they have an evaluation. Do I have cigarettes? Do I not? Do I really want to do this? Am I trying to kind of be more healthy? And then basically, then they can, whether or not they move forward with it from a motivational point of view, they check their ability. And then if they have time, then they can actually do it. So just as a very brief way to do that. But say we wanted to kind of interject some kind of design into this. So we could interject that at different points. So basically, if we knew what the cue was, so if there's a large audience where they have similar type of cue, we can say, okay, well, at bars, maybe because people smoke when they drink, then we can actually kind of look at a design intervention there. So can we intervene from a design perspective here? And similarly, if we turn it around and say, okay, well, actually, there's something good that we want people to do. So we want people to sign up to a new benefit scheme. So basically, how do they actually receive the cue? Where is the cue happening, and how do we design from that? So if we actually looked at the impact map as well, one of the impacts would be the behavior would be we want them to visit the website, right? So that's the behavior. We want them to visit that. So how can we actually experiment and understand how we're going to get them to visit the website? So where are the most people at? So if that's a train, or do we want to put an advertisement on a train, or do we want to if the benefit is specifically related to something, maybe let's say health wise, do we want the cue to be at the doctor's office? And then how do we actually prioritize those things for the most impact? So we can go back and forth between those as well and say, okay, well, we went out for a day and held up a sign that said, sign up for this benefit. And we got 200 people at the train station that actually signed up for that. And then we went and held up a sign at the doctor's office. I mean, literally low tech ways to kind of see like what the impact is there, and then understand how we can actually prioritize that. And maybe it needs to be a blend of those solutions as well. Maybe, those solutions can kind of work together. But that's just from the cue. So that if we know that the cue is working, and we can see all the other things that kind of come out of that. But I probably not to spend too much time on it, but does that kind of explain it a little bit more?
That sounds great. Thanks, Ryan.
So yeah, there's actually not quite a lot of time left, so I'm just going to kind of go through a few of these quite quickly. But I think one of the things when we talk about kind of language is reducing some of the different language we have here, because we've got things like user needs, which can often be labeled as goals, jobs to be done, point of view statements, behaviors, actions, activities, doing. You see things on strategic maps that say, here are the activities of the user. What does that mean? Is it an actual behavior? Is it just something that they've done for no reason? Are you offering context? It can be very difficult when we're kind of talking about these things in different ways. Value is obviously the kind of the economic value, but also some kind of intrinsic value as well, or some kind of gain, whether that's personal or social. There's the feelings and the pain points. And I think one of the things to look at is like, why do we need to understand these things? And that actually, these things really enable us to design, right? So the user need sets the function. If a user needs to receive, some kind of benefit, then that is the function that this thing needs to allow them to access that benefit. So that's really going to set kind of the, and it also sets the kind of beginning and the end points of that specific context. The behavior is basically how we actually literally impact change. If we're trying to change their behavior, whether that's something kind of small, as to fill out a form, or if it's something big like health impacts, or risk aversion for things like traffic safety and things like that, then we need to be able to understand that those are the impacts that we're looking at, and they are the specific, like digging down into the behaviors and treating them very, I think, very carefully. They're very important. Sometimes doing research just on one specific behavior so that you can actually understand how that behavior is working, and that can be the key to kind of making something work or not. The value is basically from the user side is basically how they decide on what they do and what they want to use. I know that sometimes that can be a bit blurry in kind of from a policy side, which is like, well, this is the policy, so they have to do this. That's true, but I think kind of from a push-pull perspective, it's always better if we can get people to do the thing that we want them to do because they're getting some value out of it. I've seen kind of quite a number of problems where people are very frustrated because, people just don't do this thing that we want them to do enough. And if you look at it, say, well, what actually are they getting from that? And if they're not getting a lot, you can dictate that all you want, but at the end of the day, it's just going to make more headache for them, more work, more cognitive overload. So it just becomes much more of a burden to them than it is to a benefit. And it also kind of like it enables us to design. So if we understand that they value efficiency, right, we can make the system very efficient, and that enables us to really connect with them on a specific value level. Their feelings as well. It basically dictate why they behave in a certain way. It gives us a context of use. If you're upset, if you're going through a traumatic event, say something happened to you and you've come to the police to say, I'm trying to report, an assault on myself, that's a context of use that is very important, right? They're not going to be able to give the information maybe that they in the way that you might want them, and you need to be sensitive to that. So and then I think the pain point as well is just really any kind of barrier to value, but also enables us to prioritize, because it says, okay, if we have a lot of pain in a specific area or a large pain point, then we can prioritize that. Overall, so this is just an example, but if you say like, I need to change a tire, if you're a hopeful new driver who values kind of like clean hands, what is the solution that you might want to provide for that? Well, that solution might be a changing tire service, right? That could be the solution that you choose for that. Maybe it's somebody who's self-sufficient. Maybe you have a self-sufficient child who wants to learn how to change a tire. What is the solution going to be for that? Could you design a kit that makes it easier for a child to change a tire and learn how engineering works and things like that? So this allows us to kind of reframe all the problems, do the work that we need to do from a design perspective to kind of create good solutions. So we're kind of there's not a whole lot of time left, so I just want to kind of get through the next kind of few things. But what I've done is as well is tried to kind of connect up a bunch of different aspects to be able to see, okay, actually, if we just look at these kind of core elements, they can go across lots of different kind of models that we can basically then bring together. Some of these are around prioritization, things like the Kano model, or I use a specific thing called the driver statement, which allows me to kind of input varying degrees of project problem statements. So oftentimes what is kind of the brief from the departments is usually not very well suited to getting an outcome. It can be quite difficult. So basically the driver statement allows me to say, okay, well, what is it that you're trying to solve? What is the future state that we want to do, and what objectives do we think are going to get to that place? And allows us to actually create kind of clear objectives for prototyping and experimenting. Otherwise, it becomes kind of quite difficult. I think there's also a shift here, which is that, going from prototyping a service really to more to prototyping to uncovering these elements. And I think if we shift that, it really rapidly changes things. I'll just give you a couple quick examples. So one of the projects a while back I worked on was the delivery of some materials. So they wanted to deliver some materials to their users. And they knew exactly they were gonna create this this large scale system, multi-million-dollar system to deliver those materials, and that's what we were headed towards. And I said, well, one of these key assumptions here is, do people want to receive materials from you as a department? They haven't done that before. That's never been done. Should we actually deliver the materials from you as a department? So I basically just mocked up these in 10 minutes. Said let's test these out. Let's put them in front of users. So we kind of put from different organizations to see kind of like what the impact was and how they felt about those different things. And in the end, they said, well, if you gave me information from you, I think it would be mandatory. We would need to use it. It would be a regulated thing. And they didn't want that. That was not the intention at all. And it said, well, okay, but then you can't do this, right? You can't be from you. It doesn't work that way. And so with a very, very small experiment, they actually were forced to change the policy because it just didn't match up to what the outcomes that they actually wanted. And I think, these things don't have to be quite, they don't need to be very, take a lot of time or effort or money to be able to do, because we're looking mostly at behavior. Another thing that we looked at one time was, so we were trying to understand how how a specific group designed something. So what I did was, in a couple of days, I designed a kind of a deck of cards that they could actually design the thing themselves. So we could observe them designing how they actually created that thing. And that really allowed us to kind of get a deep understanding of the things that they valued and the things that they needed as well, right? Because there was a high variability in the way that they in the things that they needed and the way they approached it, and this really gave us a kind of a much deeper insight into the values of that. One of the ways that I've been trying to kind of like create a sense of calm within this as well is through kind of creation of a dashboard. So I've kind of created this. This is from a recent project, but basically, if we look at kind of like this as a if we have kind of like a specificity on the down below, so we kind of we get more specific as we go down, and we get more more general on the left and more specific on the right as well. Then we can actually kind of say, okay, well, look, here we can understand our problem space as we start to kind of evolve our problem solution fit, things like that. We're able to kind of map that and not be thrown around the place so much as well. Also, in a recent project, so we created a solution tracker, and even with a small team, a very small team, but we looked at kind of 160 different kind of policy, service, feature ideas, and we were able to basically evaluate those and say, well, which of these things are going to bring the most value, and how does that connect to the value of what we're getting from our kind of core user group? So we were able to kind of like do that. So I think one of the things is, like, if we're talking about making a lot more space, instead of having this one slice of alpha be kind of experimentation, one of the things that, if we're experimenting with prototypes and solutions earlier on in the process, it actually takes a lot of the sting out of that being done in alpha. Because instead of saying, oh, well, what is it going to look like? What is it going to look like? We say, oh, actually, here are some ideas we already tested, and we know they don't work because of this. And that way we can actually say we've learned something about the users, something oftentimes I think greater in detail and more honest than kind of just, I mean, obviously kind of inquiry and things like that are really great. But what users say and what they do are just very different things. So when you actually get them to make some decisions about things, they will elicit a much different response. So there's a couple of reasons why I think this doesn't work. I know we need to wrap it up, but if I go a minute over, is that okay? Or?
I unfortunately need to rush to another meeting I'm chairing, okay. So I'll need to. All right. But we can, if we send the kind of the deck of slides and the kind of recording, but maybe if there's any final things in the last minute you want to conclude on before we thank you.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I think because of the nature of some of the government work, there are some challenges. But I think one of the things is creating user needs strategy, really documenting user needs across departments, looking at that at high and lower levels, and hopefully that's led by design. I've seen very little of that actually within the departments that I've seen. Some a little bit better than others. I think, you know, validating kind of a systematic validation of the things that we talked about user needs, about values. I think limiting the learning so that you have time to do the other stuff. You know, don't try to learn everything. It's just learn the essential stuff. Be open to solutions. Because I think that is quite key to saying like, oh, let's not be scared of solutions. If we have a way to determine whether a solution is good or not, then we're able to actually quickly to make decisions about those things. And we have an evidentiary trail to be able to document that and say, look, you know, here's why we made this decision. It's very clear. And then the last step actually connects to the question we had earlier, which is identifying large problem types. So I think one of the things is that if we talk about value and how we can kind of bring in value from academia, from other types of spaces, one of the things is understanding kind of like how that problem type is. So one of the problems I worked on recently was kind of a common resource problem. So the tragedy of the commons. And, you know, there has been good academic work on design principles for that. So how can we use that information to calculate the value for users, right? Yes, some of the value specifically to users might not be derived, but overall, we can get a bigger picture of the actual problem. I think that's same for like variability in decision making, bias in decision making, and things like collective action problems as well. So I think that's I'll stop there. But thanks very much for having me, and happy to go into more detail some other time.
Yeah, that was really great, Ryan. It was a really great comprehensive tour of the issue and some really practical tools as well that we'll take away. Some of that, you know, people have used, some that people are discovering now, and in particular how you connect those in really practical ways. So thanks again, Ryan, and thanks everyone for joining. We'll send around the recording, and if you do want to connect up with Ryan as well, we'll send your email address, Ryan, if you're okay with that, to everyone attendees, and your website as well. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Hopefully your ideas will be buzzing and you can start kind of thinking about how you might use some of these approaches and kind of principles into projects that you're working on. Yeah, hope to see you soon at one of our future events. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Thank you.